The vast chamber of the Galactic Senate buzzed with activity, as representatives from 100 different worlds prepared for the day's session. The room itself was a marvel of engineering, a massive dome with curved walls that reached up toward a ceiling painted to look like the galaxy itself. Thousands of seats were arranged in tiered circles, each section designated for different planetary alliances and federations. Senator Kolzax of the Thexian Empire adjusted his titanium-reinforced exoskeleton as he settled into his seat. The eight-eyed diplomat turned one of his eye stalks toward the main entrance where a small commotion was brewing. "Is that the human delegation?" he asked his aide, a smaller Thexian whose armor bore fewer battle markings. "Yes, Senator. The first human representative to the Galactic Senate arrives today," the aide confirmed. All around the chamber, senators and ambassadors were making similar observations. The Veritian ambassadors checked their energy shields one final time. The massive Dracon representatives flexed their armored claws. Even the peaceful Xylaxian collective had dressed their delegates in lightweight protection suits. And then Senator Gregory Phillips of Earth walked in, wearing nothing but a tailored, navy blue suit. A hush fell over the nearest section of the chamber. Then whispers began to spread across the room like ripples in a pond. Gregory walked with confident strides, nodding politely to those he passed. His only companions were two aides, a woman named Olivia Wright and a man named Daniel Garcia. They too wore only formal Earth attire, Olivia in a gray dress suit and Daniel in dark slacks and a jacket. "The human has no protection," Kolzax whispered, his voice betraying his shock. "Not even basic dermal plating." His aide's upper eyes blinked rapidly, a sign of confusion in their species. "Perhaps they hide their defenses? Some form of technology we cannot detect?" "Scan them," ordered Kolzax. The aide discreetly activated a small device on his wrist armor. After a moment, he reported, "Nothing, Senator. No shields, no subdermal implants, no reactive armor. They are completely vulnerable." Across the chamber, similar conversations were happening in dozens of languages. Some senators viewed this display with concern, others with contempt, and a few with cautious curiosity. Ambassador Dorla of the Xylaxian collective was among the curious. Her people were known for their diplomatic skills, though even they considered basic protection essential in the often heated debates of the Senate. She rose from her seat and approached the human delegation as they were being shown to their assigned section. "Honored human representatives," she greeted them, her translator converting her melodic language to English. "I am Ambassador Dorla, of the Xylaxian collective." Gregory turned and smiled warmly. "Ambassador Dorla, it's a pleasure to meet you. I am Senator Gregory Phillips, representing Earth and the Sol System. These are my aides, Olivia Wright and Daniel Garcia." Dorla's forearms performed a graceful greeting gesture, which Gregory and his team attempted to mirror. This seemed to please the ambassador. "If I may ask a question, Senator Phillips," Dorla continued, her large eyes blinking slowly. "Where is your protective gear? Senate proceedings can become intense." Gregory exchanged a brief glance with his aides before responding. "We don't typically wear protective gear for diplomatic meetings, Ambassador. On Earth, we resolve disagreements through words rather than physical confrontation." Dorla's translator must have struggled with this concept as she tilted her head and asked for clarification. "You mean in preliminary discussions? Surely during formal votes and major policy debates?" "No, even then," Gregory explained patiently. "Our diplomatic tradition values openness and vulnerability as signs of good faith." By now, a small crowd of curious senators had gathered nearby, listening to this exchange. A tall, insect-like representative from the Hexapod Alliance clicked his mandibles in what his species considered laughter. "The human must be joking," he said to his companions. "No species reaches space travel without understanding the need for protection during political discourse." Gregory heard this comment and turned to address the Hexapod diplomat directly. "I assure you we're quite serious. Earth's international relations have operated without physical protection for diplomats for centuries." The news spread quickly through the chamber as senators took their seats for the opening of the session. Some viewed this human approach as a sign of weakness, others as foolishness, A few elder species recognized it as either supreme confidence or naivety. High above the Senate floor in a private observation box, 3 ancient members of the Senate Council watched with interest. Most unusual, commented Elder Jitho of the Enlightened Ones, the oldest known spacefaring civilization. In 10,000 years of galactic politics, I have never seen a species debut without defensive measures. It could be a strategy, suggested Elder Vox of the Silicon Mines, a calculated risk to appear harmless. The third elder, a gaseous entity, named Orn, whose species had long ago abandoned physical form, pulsed thoughtfully. Or perhaps they truly do not understand the danger. The historical records show that isolation breeds unusual cultural developments. Down on the Senate floor, the session was called to order. The massive chamber fell silent as the Senate President, a towering reptilian from the Saurian Alliance, activated the central speaking platform. Today we welcome a new species to our galactic community, the President announced, his deep voice echoing through the chamber. The humans of Earth have been granted observer status with a path to full membership to be determined. Gregory stood when called upon and walked to the speaker's podium. The simple act of crossing the open floor without protective gear caused many senators to shift uncomfortably in their seats. To them, it looked like someone walking through a battlefield without armor. Honored representatives of the galaxy, Gregory began, his voice clear and strong despite the vastness of the chamber. Earth is grateful for this opportunity to join your community of worlds. We come in peace and with respect for the ancient traditions of this Senate. As he spoke, scanners throughout the chamber continued to search for hidden defenses, finding none. Security personnel moved closer to the podium, uncertain how to protect someone who had no shields to integrate with the Senate's defensive systems. We look forward to learning from your wisdom, Gregory continued, unaware of the security concerns he was causing, and sharing our own perspectives. Earth may be new to this galactic stage, but humanity has a long history of diplomacy, trade, and cultural exchange. When he finished his brief introduction and returned to his seat, the chamber remained unusually quiet. Senators turned to their neighbors, communicating in whispers and encrypted signals. This will be interesting, Olivia said quietly to Gregory. As they watched the reactions, Gregory nodded slightly. They think we're either fools or hiding something. Daniel leaned in from his other side. And which is it, sir? A small smile touched Gregory's lips as he watched the armored, shielded, and weaponized representatives of 1,000 worlds try to make sense of humanity's approach. Neither, he replied. And that's precisely what they'll find most unsettling. 2 solar weeks had passed since humanity's introduction to the Galactic Senate. Senator Gregory Phillips and his aides had settled into a routine of attending daily sessions, studying galactic law, and meeting with curious alien representatives. They had converted their assigned office space into a functional base of operations, complete with earth plants that reminded them of home, and digital screens displaying information about the hundreds of species they were learning to work with. Gregory sat at his desk, reviewing notes on his tablet when Olivia Wright entered the office with a concerned look on her face. "Senator, we have a problem," she said, placing her own tablet in front of him. "The Vulgarian delegation has proposed new legislation." Gregory studied the document and frowned. "They want to restrict mining rights in asteroid belts they claim are culturally significant, including 3 that Earth has already begun surveying," Daniel Garcia added as he joined them. "If this passes, our mining operations will need to shut down immediately." Gregory leaned back in his chair. "How much support does this proposal have?" "The Vulgarians have allied with the Thoraxian Hive and the Quantum Collective," Olivia explained. "Together they control nearly 40% of the votes. And they only need 51% to pass it," Gregory mused. "When is this coming?" "To the floor." "Today," Daniel said. "In about 2 hours. It was added to the agenda this morning." Gregory nodded slowly. "A tactical move. They're hoping we won't have time to organize opposition." He stood up and straightened his suit jacket. "Well, let's not disappoint them. Daniel, find everything you can about these supposedly sacred asteroid belts. Olivia, I need a list of senators who might be sympathetic to our position." As his aides hurried to work, Gregory walked to the window that overlooked the massive Senate plaza below. Delegates from across the galaxy moved about, some floating, some crawling, some walking on any number of legs. All of them, except the humans, wore some form of protection. Even in this supposedly safe diplomatic zone, no alien species felt comfortable without armor. 2 hours later, Gregory entered the Senate chamber. The vast room hummed with activity as nearly 2,000 representatives prepared for the day's session. He had memorized his talking points and was ready to speak against the Vulgarian proposal. As he took his seat, he noticed several nearby senators watching him with interest. By now, word had spread about the defenseless humans, and Gregory had become something of a curiosity. Some senators still believed it was a trick or strategy. Others thought humans were simply foolish. A few had begun to wonder if there was something about human diplomacy they had failed to understand. The Senate president called the session to order, and various matters of galactic business were discussed. Finally, the Vulgarian proposal was announced. "The floor recognizes Senator Drox of the Vulgarian Confederation," the president announced. A massive figure rose from the Vulgarian section. Senator Drox stood nearly 8 feet tall, with gray-green skin and a heavy brow that shadowed his 4 yellow eyes. His ceremonial armor was decorated with symbols of past victories, and various weapons hung from his belt, all ceremonial, but impressive nonetheless. "Honored colleagues," Drox began, his deep voice echoing through the chamber. "The proposal before you is simple. There are 17 asteroid belts that hold great cultural and religious significance to the Vulgarian people. We ask that these areas be protected from mining and other industrial activities." Gregory listened carefully as Drox continued, noting how the Vulgarian cleverly emphasized the cultural aspects while downplaying the economic impact. When Drox finished, several allied senators spoke in support of the proposal. Finally, the Senate president announced, "The floor recognizes Senator Phillips of Earth." As Gregory rose to speak, he noticed several senators adjusting their armor plating expectantly. Everyone in the chamber knew that Senator Drox was notorious for his aggressive rebuttals, which had once included hurling a ceremonial spear at a Proxian representative. That incident had ended without injury only because the Proxian's personal shield had deflected the weapon. Gregory walked calmly to the central speaking platform, still wearing nothing but his Earth diplomatic uniform. The contrast between him and the heavily armored Drox could not have been more striking. "Fellow senators," Gregory began, his voice clear and measured. "While I respect the Vulgarian cultural claims, I must point out several historical inaccuracies in their petition." He tapped his tablet, and holographic images appeared above the platform. Ancient star charts and records that he and Daniel had discovered in the Senate archives. These records from the Senate's own historical database show that 16 of the 17 asteroid belts in question were not formed until after the cataclysm of the Seventh Age, approximately 8,000 years ago. Gregory swiped to the next image, yet Vulgarian civilization only expanded to this region 3,000 years ago, according to their own historical records submitted when they joined the Senate. A murmur spread through the chamber. Gregory continued, methodically presenting evidence that contradicted the Vulgarian claims. He cited obscure interspecies treaties, referenced little-known Senate precedents, and quoted the Vulgarians' own cultural texts. Furthermore, Gregory added, if we look at Senate Resolution 7293, passed just 80 years ago, we see that the definition of culturally significant requires continuous presence for at least half the existence of the site in question. By the Vulgarians' own timeline, they failed to meet this standard. Throughout his presentation, Gregory maintained perfect diplomatic courtesy. He never raised his voice, never made threatening gestures, and always referred to the Vulgarians with respect. Yet with each point he systematically dismantled their claim. When he finished, the chamber was unnervingly quiet. All eyes turned to Senator Drox, who had remained standing throughout Gregory's speech. The massive Vulgarian's face had darkened to a deep green, a sign of anger in his species. The human, Drox finally growled. Speaks well but knows nothing. Of Vulgarian traditions. He slammed a fist against his armored chest. These asteroid belts were sacred to our ancestors before humans had even learned to make fire. Gregory didn't flinch at the outburst. With all due respect, Senator, I have only cited your own government's official records. If there is additional historical evidence, I'm sure the Senate would welcome its submission for review. Drox looked around the chamber, seeing uncertainty in the faces of many who had previously supported him. Despite his reinforced battle armor and the ceremonial weapons adorning his massive frame, he suddenly seemed diminished. I propose we table this legislation for further review, Drox said finally. His allies looked surprised, but none spoke up to object. The Senate President nodded. The Vulgarian proposal is tabled pending historical review. Next item on the agenda. As Gregory returned to his seat, he noticed many senators watching him with new interest. Senator Nyaleth of the Azrai Confederation leaned over from her nearby seat. You fought without fighting, she observed quietly, her delicate features curious beneath her transparent protective field. Most interesting. Gregory smiled slightly. Where I come from, we have found words to be more effective than weapons in most disputes. Yet your people have no natural defenses, Nyaleth noted. No claws, no armor, no venom. Perhaps that's why we learned to use other tools, Gregory suggested. Nyaleth's silver eyes studied him thoughtfully. I believe many in this chamber have underestimated humanity, Senator Phillips. That would be a mistake they will not make twice. As the session continued, Gregory noticed several senators sending messages to their aides, likely requesting more information about humans and Earth. He had won this first diplomatic battle, but he knew it was only the beginning. The real challenge would be earning the respect of a galactic community that had evolved with very different principles of diplomacy than humanity had. Well done, sir, Olivia whispered as she handed him notes for the next agenda item. Though I think you've made Senator Drox an enemy. Gregory nodded slightly. Perhaps. Or perhaps we've taught him something valuable about humanity. Only time would tell which was true. 3 months had passed since Senator Gregory Phillips had successfully countered the Vulgarian mining proposal. During this time, Earth's standing in the Galactic Senate had grown steadily. While many species still viewed humans with confusion or caution, others had begun to take a genuine interest in human diplomatic methods. Gregory sat in his office reviewing reports from Earth when his communication panel chimed. The face of his aide, Daniel Garcia, appeared on the screen. Senator, there's an emergency session being called. The Drokon and Hegemony delegations are in a dispute over shipping lanes in the Cygnus sector. Gregory frowned. That's near one of our colony worlds. Yes, sir, and it's getting heated. Both sides are making threats. I'll be right there, Gregory said, standing and straightening his jacket. As always, he wore a simple Earth diplomatic uniform without any protective gear. When Gregory arrived at the Senate chamber, he could immediately feel the tension in the air. The massive reptilian Drokon senators stood at their platform, scales bristling with anger. Across the chamber, the crystalline forms of the Hegemony representatives glowed with pulsing red light, a sign of aggression in their species. The Cygnus trade route has been under Drokon protection for 3 centuries, thundered the Drokon Prime Senator, his armored tail slamming against the floor for emphasis. The Hegemony ships violated our sovereignty. Your protection is unwanted and illegal, countered the Hegemony speaker, her crystalline form flashing brightly. The route passes through neutral space according to Treaty 457B. Gregory quickly found his aide Olivia Wright, who was frantically studying data on her tablet. What's happening? He asked quietly. The Drokon Confederation seized 3 Hegemony trading vessels yesterday, Olivia explained. They claim the ships were using militarized shields in Drokon space. The Hegemony says they were in neutral territory and the shields were standard issue. Gregory nodded. And now both sides are threatening military action. Exactly. And at least 12 other species have trade interests in that sector, including Earth. The Senate President was trying to maintain order, But the chamber had dissolved into loud arguments as various factions took sides. Security fields hummed with energy as threats were exchanged, and several species had activated their defensive armaments, a rare and serious breach of Senate protocol. Gregory watched as Samantha Murphy, his newest aide who had arrived from Earth just 2 weeks ago, quietly approached the central area of the chamber. She carried nothing but a data tablet. "What is she doing?" Daniel whispered with alarm. "That's the danger zone, right between the Drocon and Hegemony sections." Gregory smiled slightly. "I believe she's about to demonstrate another human diplomatic technique." Samantha stepped confidently onto the central speaking platform, move so unexpected that the chamber gradually fell silent. The Drocon Prime Senator turned his massive head toward her, baring teeth that could crush bone. "Who are you to interrupt this dispute, human?" he growled. Samantha nodded respectfully. "I am Samantha Murphy, aide to Earth Senator Phillips. I believe I have information that might help resolve this situation." The Hegemony speaker's crystalline form pulsed with skeptical blue light. "What could Earth possibly know about this matter?" "Sometimes a fresh perspective helps," Samantha replied calmly. She activated her tablet, and a holographic star map appeared above the platform. "I've been analyzing the shipping data from the Cygnus sector for the past 6 hours." With clear, simple explanations, Samantha began presenting alternative routing options that would benefit both factions. She showed how a small adjustment to the current routes would allow Drocon security patrols to maintain their presence, while giving Hegemony ships a buffer zone that respected their autonomy. "She carries no weapons," muttered one junior senator, from the Proxima Alliance to a veteran observer. "No," the elder replied, his compound eyes narrowing. "She carries something far more dangerous: compromise." As Samantha continued her presentation, Gregory noticed several other delegations leaning forward with interest. The trade routes affected many worlds, and Earth's proposal seemed to consider everyone's needs. When Samantha finished, there was a moment of silence. Then the Drocon Prime Senator looked at the Hegemony speaker. "This has merit," he admitted reluctantly. "A buffer zone would maintain our security concerns, and would recognize our right to unrestricted trade," the Hegemony speaker added, her color shifting to a more peaceful blue. "Perhaps we can discuss the specific coordinates." The Senate president quickly established a working group to finalize the details, and the emergency session was adjourned. As senators filed out of the chamber, many glanced curiously at the human delegation. Later that evening, Gregory hosted a small gathering in the Earth office. He raised a glass in a toast to Samantha. "Excellent work today," he said, smiling. "You've made quite an impression." Samantha looked a bit embarrassed by the attention. "I just applied standard conflict resolution techniques. Nothing special." "By Earth standards, perhaps," Olivia said. "But you walked unarmed into what many species consider a combat situation. The Galactic News Network is already running stories about it." Daniel nodded in agreement. "I checked the Senate archives. No one has ever interrupted a Drocon Hegemony confrontation without at least Class 3 defensive shields." Their conversation was interrupted by the office door chime. Gregory opened it to find Admiral Krull of the Baraxian fleet standing outside. The Admiral was an imposing figure, nearly 7 feet tall, with blue-gray skin and cybernetic enhancements visible along his temples. "Senator Phillips," the Admiral said with a formal nod. "May I enter?" "Of course, Admiral," Gregory replied, gesturing him in. "Would you care for a drink?" Admiral Krull declined the offer. His exoskeleton armor whirred softly as he moved into the room, looking curiously at the Earth decorations and plants. "I observed your aide's intervention today," the Admiral said, getting straight to the point. "Most remarkable." "Thank you," Gregory replied. "Samantha has excellent diplomatic skills." The Admiral turned to study Gregory with cybernetically enhanced eyes. 3 months ago, your handling of the Vulgarian mining dispute was dismissed as beginner's luck. Today's resolution of the shipping lane conflict cannot be so easily explained away." Gregory waited, sensing there was more coming. "What is your secret weapon, human?" Admiral Krull asked bluntly. "No species survives in galactic politics without protection." Gregory offered the Admiral a seat, which he took after a moment's hesitation. "Admiral, what you see as vulnerability, we see as strength," Gregory explained. "When you come to the table ready for battle, you limit yourself to only two outcomes, victory or defeat. When you come unprepared for violence, you open yourself to countless possibilities." The Admiral's exoskeleton whirred as he processed this. "A clever deception," he finally concluded. "Well played, human," Gregory smiled. "It's not a deception, Admiral. It's simply a different approach. On Earth, we learned long ago that the most effective diplomacy happens when both sides feel safe enough to be honest. But you cannot always be safe," the Admiral countered. "There are predator species in this galaxy." "True," Gregory acknowledged, "and we have defenses when needed. But we've found that not displaying those defenses often prevents the need to use them." Admiral Krull stood, his armor adjusting automatically to his movement. "The Baraxian fleet will be watching Earth's progress with great interest, Senator Phillips. You've acquired both admirers and enemies these past months." "That's the nature of diplomacy, isn't it?" Gregory replied, standing as well. After the Admiral left, Daniel turned to Gregory with a concerned expression. "Sir, he's right about the enemies part. I've been monitoring communications. At least 3 species have labeled us as a potential threat." "Because we don't wear armor?" Samantha asked, surprised. Gregory shook his head. "Because they don't understand us. And what people don't understand, they fear." Olivia looked thoughtful. "So what's our next move?" Gregory walked to the window, looking out at the gleaming spires of the Senate complex. In the evening light, he could see representatives from dozens of worlds moving about, all in their various protective gear. "We continue as we have," he said finally, "being exactly who we are. Sooner or later, they'll begin to understand." What none of them realized was how soon that understanding would be tested, and in a way that would change the Senate forever. The normal hum of activity in the Senate complex was interrupted by blaring alarms. Red warning lights flashed across the massive buildings as thousands of beings from hundreds of worlds looked up in confusion and fear. In his office, Senator Gregory Phillips was meeting with his team when the emergency system activated. The screens on the walls switched automatically to the Senate information channel. "Attention all Senate personnel and representatives," announced a calm but urgent voice. "A Class 1 stellar event has been detected in the Proxima Centauri system. Multiple inhabited worlds are in danger. Emergency response protocols are now in effect. All senators report to the main chamber immediately." Gregory looked at his team with concern. "Proxima Centauri? That's right next to our solar system." Daniel quickly pulled up information on his tablet. "It says here that a rare solar flare pattern is causing radiation storms across 7 star systems. 3 of them have populated planets." "How many people are at risk?" Gregory asked, already moving toward the door. "The initial estimate is 8 billion beings," Olivia replied, checking her own tablet as they hurried down the corridor, "including nearly 1 million humans on our Proxima colony." The Senate chamber was in chaos when they arrived. Representatives from the affected systems were shouting for immediate assistance, while other senators argued about resource allocation and response priorities. The Senate president was trying to restore order, but the panic was spreading. Gregory found his seat and surveyed the scene. He noticed that many senators had activated their full defensive systems, energy shields glowing around the Viridian section, armored panels locked in place for the Draconians, and atmospheric containment, fields buzzing around the gaseous representatives of the Mist Collective. "Senator Phillips," called a voice from nearby. Gregory turned to see Senator Nyaleth of the Azrai Confederation approaching. "Your colony in Proxima Centauri, is it affected?" "Yes," Gregory confirmed. "We have nearly 1 million people there." "What about the Azrai worlds?" "We have 2 planets in the path of the radiation storms," she said, her delicate features concerned beneath her protective field. "Over 3 billion of my people are at risk." The Senate president's amplified voice finally cut through the noise. "Senators, we must establish an emergency response committee immediately. We need evacuation ships, medical supplies, and radiation shielding. Who can contribute what resources?" What followed was a heated debate about who would contribute what to the rescue effort. Old rivalries and political disputes quickly surfaced, with some species refusing to work with others even in this crisis. "The hegemony will not allow Drokon ships in our space even for evacuations," shouted the hegemony speaker. "And we will not share our medical technology with the Thexian Empire," countered another senator. As the arguments grew more intense, something strange began to happen. The Senate chamber's ancient defensive protocols activated automatically in response to the heightened biometric readings from the delegates. Energy barriers rose between the various sections, separating faction from faction. Weapon systems were locked down. Protective pods enclosed many of the senators' seats. For the first time in 300 cycles, the Senate's emergency containment system had triggered. According to the historical records that flashed across the information screens, this had only happened 5 times in the Senate's 10,000-year history. Every senator was confined to their reinforced diplomatic pods, except Gregory and his human team, who had no protective systems to lock down. "What's happening?" Samantha asked, looking around at the barriers that now divided the chamber. "The Senate's defensive protocols," explained a Senate security officer who approached them. "When tension levels exceed safety parameters, the system activates to prevent physical confrontations." "But we can still move around freely," Daniel observed. The security officer nodded. "The system only restricts those with registered defensive systems. Since humans don't use any, you're not affected." Gregory looked thoughtfully at the divided chamber. Senators were shouting at each other from behind their barriers, but many of the communication systems had been locked down as well. The emergency response was falling apart before it had even begun. "Officer," Gregory said, "am I correct in understanding that we can move between the sections?" "Yes, Senator, but I wouldn't advise it. When the containment system activates, it usually means violence was imminent." Gregory turned to his team. "I think we've just been given an opportunity." For the next several hours, the human delegation became the physical intermediaries of the Senate. Gregory and his aides moved from section to section, carrying messages, coordinating response efforts, and building consensus where communication channels had broken down. Olivia worked with the Asrai and Viridian delegations to coordinate evacuation, ship deployments. Daniel moved between the Thexian and Xylaxian sections, negotiating the sharing of medical supplies. Samantha helped the Draken and Hegemony representatives establish neutral handoff points for refugees. Gregory himself shuttled between a dozen different delegations, slowly bringing order to the chaos. When he identified key senators who seemed most willing to cooperate, he brought them to the central platform, which remained outside the containment fields, to form an emergency coordination team. "The humans are using our safety measures against us," growled Senator Vrax of the Taurian Expanse, watching from behind his energy barrier. "No," corrected Ambassador G. Tho of the Enlightened Ones, the oldest species present. "They are simply unhindered by our limitations." By the 10th hour of the crisis, Gregory had managed to establish a working command structure. Evacuation fleets were launching, medical ships were being deployed, and temporary radiation shelters were being constructed. 17 previously hostile species had committed resources to joint evacuation fleets. In a particularly tense moment, Gregory personally negotiated an agreement between the Hegemony and the Drokon Confederation, allowing their rescue ships to enter each other's territory to save lives. "This is unprecedented," the Drokon Prime Senator rumbled, his massive scaled head nodding with reluctant respect. "Our species has been in conflict for 7 generations. Some things are more important than old grudges," Gregory replied simply. The containment system finally powered down. Nearly 14 hours after it had activated, the Senate chamber looked very different. Rather than returning to their assigned sections, many senators gathered at the central platform where Gregory and his team had established the coordination center. The Senate president approached Gregory as the barrier fields disappeared. "Senator Phillips," she said, her voice carrying through the chamber, "the Senate owes you and your team a debt of gratitude. Your ability to move freely during the containment proved fortunate." Gregory nodded respectfully. "We were happy," To help, Madam President. Has there been any update on the evacuations? Yes, she replied, activating the central display screen. The first wave of evacuation ships has reached safety. Over 2 billion beings have been moved to secure locations. The radiation shielding deployed on 3 worlds appears to be functioning correctly. A cheer went up around the chamber. For many species, this was the first time they had cooperated on such a scale in centuries. As Gregory looked around the room, he noticed something had changed in how the other senators were looking at humanity. There was still confusion, still some suspicion, but there was also something new. Respect. Ambassador Jitho floated over to where Gregory stood. The ancient being's translucent form pulsed with soft light. Your people have demonstrated something important today, Senator Phillips, the ambassador said in a whispery voice. Perhaps armor is not always an advantage. Gregory smiled tiredly. Sometimes what looks like a weakness can be a strength, Ambassador. As the crisis response continued, Gregory knew that the galactic political landscape had shifted irrevocably. Humanity had proven itself not despite its differences, but because of them. One standard galactic year had passed since humanity's arrival in the Senate. In that time, Earth had moved from observer status to full membership, and Senator Gregory Phillips had become one of the most respected voices in galactic politics. The Proxima Centauri crisis had changed how many species viewed humans, though plenty of skeptics remained. Gregory stood before the mirror in his quarters, adjusting his formal diplomatic uniform. Today marked the anniversary of Earth's introduction to the Senate, and there would be a special session to commemorate the occasion. His aide, Olivia Wright, knocked on the door. "Ready, Senator?" she asked. "The ceremony begins in 30 minutes. Gregory nodded. "As ready as I'll ever be. Any idea what to expect?" "Just the usual formalities," Olivia replied. Though Daniel mentioned some unusual activity in the Senate chamber earlier this morning. Unusual how? He wasn't sure. Just said that maintenance crews were making adjustments to the seating arrangements. Gregory raised an eyebrow but said nothing. In the past year, he had learned that the Senate loved its ceremonies and surprises. Together, they left his quarters and made their way through the winding corridors of the Senate complex. Outside the main chamber, they met Samantha and Daniel, who were talking with Senator Nia Leth of the Azrai Confederation. Over the past year, the Azrai had become some of Earth's strongest allies. "Senator Phillips," Nyaleth greeted him with a respectful gesture. "Today is a significant milestone for Earth." "Thank you, Senator," Gregory replied. "We're honored by the recognition." Nyaleth's silver eyes twinkled with amusement. "I believe you may find more than just recognition waiting inside." Before Gregory could ask what she meant, the massive doors to the Senate chamber swung open. The human delegation entered to find the vast room already filled with representatives from across the galaxy. As they walked toward their assigned section, Gregory noticed something odd. Many of the senators were dressed differently than usual. The mighty Draconians had set aside their chest plates. The Vulgarians had deactivated their energy shields. Even the paranoid Zalatax had retracted their poisoned defensive spines. Not all senators had changed their appearance. Many still wore their full protective gear. But enough had altered, their usual dress to make it immediately noticeable. "What's going on?" Gregory whispered to Olivia. "I have no idea," she replied, looking just as surprised. As they reached their seats, Senator Kulzax of the Thexian Empire approached. The eight-eyed diplomat had been one of the first to witness humanity's arrival a year ago. Today, he had removed the upper portion of his exoskeleton armor, leaving only the basic lower framework. "Senator Phillips," Kulzax said with a formal bow. "We have been observing humanity's methods carefully this past year." Gregory nodded respectfully. "I've noticed some changes in the chamber today, Senator Kulzax." "Yes," the Thexian confirmed. "For 10,000 years, the Senate has operated on the principle that political discourse requires physical protection. You have demonstrated an alternative approach." Gregory looked around the chamber again, noting how many senators had modified their traditional protective gear. "I'm honored that some have found value in our methods. It began after the Proxima Centauri crisis. Kulzax explained. Many species realized that your ability to move freely during the containment protocol was not merely luck, but a different philosophy in action. The Senate President called the session to order, and Kulzax returned to his seat. As the formal proceedings began, Gregory noticed one more significant change to the chamber. The central area, which had traditionally been open space used only for speakers addressing the full Senate, now contained new seating. The Senate President, a towering reptilian from the Saurian Alliance, explained the change. Honored representatives, today we not only celebrate Earth's first year in the Galactic Senate, but also implement a change to our traditions. The central section before you will now be designated for what we are calling open diplomacy, a practice inspired by our human colleagues. A murmur went through the chamber as the President continued. Representatives who wish to engage in human-style diplomacy, unarmed debate with strict rules of decorum, may now choose to be seated in this central section. Those who prefer traditional methods will remain in the armored outer rings. Both approaches are equally valid and respected. To everyone's surprise, including Gregory's, the central section was nearly full by the time the senators had rearranged themselves. About 30% of the Senate had chosen to adopt the human approach. The ceremonial session continued with speeches and formal recognitions of Earth's contributions over the past year. When it was Gregory's turn to speak, he approached the podium with the same calm confidence he had shown since his first day. "Fellow senators," he began, "1 year ago, I stood before you as a curiosity, the unarmed diplomat from a world many of you had never heard of. Today, I stand before you as a colleague and I hope as a friend." Gregory spoke about cooperation and mutual understanding, about the Proxima Centauri crisis and how it had brought many worlds together. He spoke about Earth's hope for a peaceful future as part of the galactic community. When the formal session ended, there was a reception in the grand hall adjacent to the chamber. Gregory found himself surrounded by senators from dozens of worlds, many eager to discuss the new open diplomacy section. As he spoke with a group of interested representatives, his aide Olivia approached with a note. "From Admiral Krull," she said quietly. Gregory excused himself and read the message. "Your approach spreads like a contagion. Interesting strategy. The Baraxian fleet remains watchful." He smiled slightly at the Admiral's continuing suspicion. Some species would take longer to adjust to humanity's methods than others. As Gregory rejoined the reception, he found himself in conversation with Ambassador Jitho of the Enlightened Ones, one of the oldest beings in the Senate. "They're copying our approach but still don't fully understand why it works," Gregory observed, watching as various senators mingled in the hall, some still in full armor, others having removed portions of their protective gear. "They will in time," the ancient ambassador replied, his translucent form glowing softly. "For most species, armor evolved from necessity. Before they could speak, they had claws. Before they had laws, they had venom or shells or spines. Humans were physically vulnerable from the beginning," Gregory said. "We had to develop other skills to survive." "Precisely," Jitho said. "And that is what these others are slowly learning, that humanity didn't abandon armor because you're peaceful. You abandoned it because you discovered something more powerful. The ability to turn enemies into allies." Gregory looked around the grand hall. Throughout the vast reception area, thousands of alien representatives debated the future of galactic civilization, most still in their traditional armor, but a growing number embracing the human way. Not because humans were physically imposing, but because they had demonstrated a truth that transcended species. That true power lies not in the ability to withstand attacks, but in the ability to render them unnecessary. "It's just the beginning," Gregory said. "We still have much to learn from each other." "Indeed," the ambassador agreed. "But this past year has made one thing clear to many in the Senate." "What's that?" Gregory asked. The ancient being's form pulsed with what might have been amusement. "That while every alien may need armor in the Senate, perhaps the humans never will." As the reception continued around them, Gregory couldn't help but feel pride in what Earth had accomplished in just 1 year. They had arrived as outsiders, appeared vulnerable, and yet had begun to change traditions that had stood for millennia, not through force or intimidation, but through the simple power of a different approach. The most dangerous species in the galaxy had arrived unarmed and in doing so had begun to quietly reshape it.